It started like any other Monday. Hallways echoing with laughter. Lockers slamming shut. Teachers rushing into classrooms with coffee in hand. And in the middle of all that ordinary sat something extraordinary. Jaylen Carter, 17, senior, quiet, brilliant. But you wouldn't know it by looking at him, dressed in plain sneakers, worn jeans, and a hoodie with the school's cracked logo he blended in. Invisible. Just another black kid trying to stay out of trouble. But inside that boy, a mind that danced with code like it was poetry. A soul that taught itself Python at 12. A heart that stayed up past midnight, fixing old laptops for kids who couldn't afford them. Jaylen was the kind of student you only get once in a generation. And today was supposed to be his moment. The school auditorium buzzed with energy. Parents filled the folding chairs. Teachers lined the back walls. And the banner overhead read, Annual Future Leaders Scholarship Ceremony. Jaylen sat in the front row, hands clenched, eyes forward. His mother, Tanya, stood in the aisle with her phone ready, tears already threatening to spill. He'd made it. All the sleepless nights, all the times he skipped lunch to work in the library, all the you people stares he endured in the robotics lab. All of it had finally led here. Preston Carlisle, the school's guidance counselor. White, early 50s, golf tan. A face that said, I know what's best. He leaned over to the principal and whispered something while glancing at Jaylen. And right then, you knew something wasn't right. Jaylen stood up shaky and approached the stage. Excuse me, there must be a mistake. My name, I was told. Mr. Preston cut him off with a tone like ice. Jaylen, we reviewed your file again. There were inconsistencies. GPA irregularities. The committee decided to withdraw your eligibility. These awards go to students who meet the standards. Gasps from the crowd. His mother shouted, That's a lie. His GPA is perfect. He's top of his class. Mr. Preston didn't blink. If you want to discuss this further, you can schedule an appointment. But please don't make a scene. Don't make a scene. That phrase. Weaponized silence. Every black parent knows it. Every black child's been warned. Jaylen just stood there, frozen. The auditorium lights felt too bright, the stares too sharp. Some whispered, some looked away, some smirked. And then, the principal grabbed the mic. We'd like to thank all students for applying. We wish everyone a bright future. And that was it. Jaylen was erased. But you know what they forgot? You don't erase someone like Jaylen Carter, because behind those quiet eyes, behind that calm, polite nod, was something they couldn't measure on paper, something that didn't need their approval. And as the crowd began to file out, Mr. Preston walked past Jaylen and whispered, Next time, try applying for the athletic scholarships. They might be more fitting. Jaylen didn't flinch. He just watched Preston's polished shoes walk away. But in his hand was something no one noticed. A flash drive. And what was on it would flip this entire school and the world that mocked him upside down. That night, Jaylen didn't cry. Not once. While his mom paced the living room in disbelief, holding the email confirmation that proved he was on the scholarship list just 3 days ago. While friends texted him things like, Bro, WTF just happened, and they robbed you, man, Jaylen sat at his desk. Silent. Focused. Watching. On his screen were lines of code and a school database login portal. Because what the school didn't know, what Mr. Preston could never imagine, was that Jaylen had seen this coming. Not this exact moment, but this kind of moment. The moment when someone in power says, you don't belong here. So he prepared. He had backups of his grades, screenshots, time-stamped records, a full download of his entire academic file, even emails from teachers praising his project that won state science fair last fall. He didn't need to hack the system. He already knew how it worked. The real hack was watching how people treated him, thinking he was too soft, too quiet to fight back. The next day, Jaylen walked into school early, headphones in, hoodie up, no eye contact. The hallway was still empty. He made his way to the tech lab, the one he practically lived in for 4 years, and took a seat behind a monitor. From his backpack, he pulled out a flash drive, the same one he held during the ceremony. On it, a copy of the scholarship selection spreadsheet, including a version saved a week before the ceremony when his name was on the list. Metadata showing it was altered 3 days before the event by none other than Preston Carlisle. And a full video recording of Preston 2 weeks earlier in a private meeting with school board members, captured accidentally through an online classroom link Jaylen had left running in the background. Preston's words clear as day. "We can't just hand over scholarships to every diversity candidate with a good GPA. We have to be selective. Optics matter." That one sentence, that was the real curriculum being taught here. At lunch, the tension hung thick. Jaylen entered the cafeteria. Eyes followed him. Some pitied, some judged. And at the faculty table, Preston sat sipping coffee, calm as a man who thought he'd gotten away with it. Jaylen didn't go to class that afternoon. Instead, he walked into the admin building and handed a sealed manila envelope to the school secretary. For the board. Urgent. She looked confused. He didn't wait. He turned and walked out the front doors, and didn't come back. Meanwhile, inside the faculty lounge, Preston was gloating. "You see that he told Coach Daniels? That Carter kid's mom emailed 6 times. I didn't even open them." Daniels chuckled uneasily. But before Preston could finish his victory lap, the intercom clicked on. "Mr. Carlisle, please report to the superintendent's office. Immediately." His smile faded just slightly. He grabbed his blazer, stood up, and muttered, "Probably another parent complaint." But in the back of his mind, a whisper of worry. Because what he didn't know was that someone else had already started looking into Jaylen. Not from the school board, not even from the district, but from California. From a little office with a big logo. Google. Because 2 weeks earlier, Jaylen had quietly submitted a portfolio to a national open tech challenge. Just for fun. Just to see. And what he submitted blew the minds of their engineers. A full AI-powered algorithm that diagnosed laptop hardware failures through microphone pitch analysis, written entirely in Python, with less than 300 lines of code. And the lead recruiter. He didn't see a hoodie. He didn't see GPA. He saw genius. Back in the school office, Preston stepped into the superintendent's room. 3 people were already seated. The principal, the assistant superintendent, and a school board member with a printed stack of documents on the desk. "What's this about?" Preston asked. The superintendent didn't answer right away. He picked up the flash drive from the table, held it up. "This was submitted anonymously this morning." Preston's eyes narrowed, and it contains, among other things, the superintendent continued altered grade reports, video evidence of bias, and statements that clearly violate state policy. Preston scoffed. "That's ridiculous. Anyone could doctor files like that." "That student Carter? He's been causing trouble." "No," the board member interrupted. "He's been quietly building something the rest of us can only dream of." There was a silence. And for the first time, Preston didn't have a smug reply. Just sweat. Later that night, Jaylen sat by the window. His mom walked in holding her phone. "You got a message." Jaylen looked over. "From who?" She smiled, but with tears. "It says, 'We'd like to speak to you about a future with Google.'" And just like that, the spark became a flame. And Preston. He had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, the school was buzzing. Whispers traveled faster than the morning bell. Teachers spoke in hushed tones. Students stared at their phones, replaying the same leaked video clip over and over. We can't just hand over scholarships to every diversity candidate. The clip had spread like wildfire. Reddit, Instagram, even a few local news stations had picked it up. And at the center of the storm, Mr. Preston Carlisle. But Preston didn't go down easy. He walked into school that morning in his usual polished blazer, pretending not to notice the silence that followed him like a shadow. He even smiled, but his eyes darted. He could feel it. The shift. The power he once held in whispers and paperwork was crumbling under the weight of a single truth he'd been exposed. And Jaylen. He didn't show up to school at all. He didn't need to, because by now everyone was talking. Emails were flying between the district and legal teams. Parents had started demanding transparency. And then it happened. Google made it public. They tweeted a photo of a young black teen standing in front of a whiteboard full of code with the caption, "Meet Jaylen Carter, accepted into our Early Genius program." His work blew us away. The future is his. It went viral in under an hour. News outlets picked it up. Tech blogs dissected his project. And in every article, one thing kept repeating. Jaylen wasn't just a great student. He was a visionary. But perhaps the most poetic part of all, Jaylen never had to say a word. Back at the school board office, a crisis meeting was underway. The superintendent looked tired. The principal looked terrified. And Mr. Preston, well, for once, he wasn't doing the talking. A civil rights attorney had joined the meeting. She wore a navy suit and glasses, and her voice was calm, surgical. The student in question, she said, has been subjected to systematic bias, proven by documentation, recorded statements, and a paper trail that includes willful misconduct. She paused, looked directly at Preston. Frankly, if this were a private company, he'd already be terminated. Preston opened his mouth, closed it. She continued. You removed a student's name from a scholarship list not because of merit, but because of race. That's not only unethical, it's illegal. And there it was. No more hiding behind inconsistencies. No more coded language. Just the raw truth. Preston slumped back in his chair. The room was silent, and somewhere hundreds of miles away, Jaylen sat in a glass conference room inside Google's campus, surrounded by engineers who looked at him with awe, not judgment. He wasn't wearing a tie. He wasn't wearing a suit, just that same hoodie. But this time, the room leaned in when he spoke. The next day, a town hall was called at the school. It was packed. Parents, students, media all gathered in the gymnasium. Cameras lined the back wall. And standing at the center behind a shaky microphone was Superintendent McAllister. We have failed one of our brightest minds, he said, voice heavy. And we have allowed bias to blind our process. He looked directly at the crowd. Mr. Preston Carlisle is no longer employed by this district, effective immediately. Applause broke out. But then, something happened that no one expected. Jaylen walked in. He hadn't planned to. But when his mom told him the whole school would be there, he said quietly, "Then they should see who they tried to erase." He stepped onto the stage, calm, composed. The crowd hushed. And when he spoke, he didn't talk about revenge. He didn't insult Preston. He didn't gloat. He simply said, "You thought I wasn't worth the chance. But all I needed was the work. I didn't come here to fight for attention. I came to build something. And I'm still building. This isn't about me anymore. It's about every kid who walks these halls and gets overlooked. Every name that never made the list. Every time someone was told they weren't the right fit." And then he paused. "You can't stop what's coming. We're not asking anymore. We're creating." That mic drop felt like thunder. Students stood. Parents clapped. Even a few teachers wiped their eyes. Because it wasn't just a twist in the story. It was a turning point in a system that needed shaking. And Jaylen, the quiet kid they tried to silence, had become a voice for everyone still waiting to be seen. Jaylen didn't return to regular classes after the town hall, not because he was running away from it, but because he was stepping into something much bigger. The very next week he was flown to Mountain View, California, Google's headquarters, a place where minds build futures. When he stepped into that campus surrounded by gardens and robotics, labs, AI prototypes, and solar towers, he realized something. This was what they tried to keep from him. Not just the scholarship, not just recognition, but access. Access to possibility. Meanwhile, back at the school, the district released a formal apology, not just to Jaylen, but to the community, to the students who had been silenced, to the voices they'd ignored for years. The fallout didn't stop with Preston Carlisle. Several past scholarship decisions were reopened and investigated. New diversity, equity, and transparency policies were introduced, and students, especially Black students, finally saw something they hadn't seen before, that fighting back could work. That silence was no longer the price of survival. Jaylen's story had become a blueprint. Then a letter arrived. It was sealed in ivory paper, marked with the district's crest. Inside was a personal message from the superintendent. Jaylen, the district board, has decided to posthumously reinstate your scholarship, though it may now be symbolic. We also extend an invitation for you to return as a guest speaker. Your voice has changed us. Jaylen smiled when he read it, not out of pride, but because they finally called him by his name. Months later, the auditorium was packed again, but this time, Jaylen stood at the podium, not as a hopeful student, but as a keynote speaker. Behind him, a banner read, "Tech is for everyone building a future without bias." He stood taller now, still in his hoodie, still soft-spoken, but his presence filled the room. And when he spoke, it wasn't just a speech, it was a mirror. You can try to gatekeep opportunity, you can rig the lists, change the spreadsheets, but what you can't stop is brilliance. You can't erase potential. You can't rewrite genius out of history. I wasn't the only one. I was just the one who had proof. There are hundreds more like me, walking these hallways being told they don't belong, until one day they make something so undeniable. Even the gatekeepers start asking for permission. He paused. I'm not angry anymore. I'm building. Because the future isn't waiting for approval. The crowd erupted. Some clapped. Some cried. But all of them listened. Because that moment was more than redemption. It was revolution. And Preston. The last anyone heard, he had moved to another state. No more counselor title. No more school board meetings. Just a resume stained by one truth. You tried to erase the wrong kid. Back at Google, Jaylen now led a small innovation team of interns and engineers. Still young, still growing, but already creating tools that helped under-resourced schools repair tech on their own. Already building platforms that made scholarships more transparent, more fair. He didn't just rise, he reached back. Because real power doesn't gatekeep. It opens doors. In the final shot of this story, we see Jaylen walking out of the Google campus. Sunlight over his shoulder, phone buzzing with messages from mentors, recruiters, even students asking for advice. He puts the phone away, smiles, and keeps walking, because he knows now. He was never just a name on a list. He was the algorithm they couldn't decode, the system they couldn't control, the future they never saw coming. Fade to black white text on screen. They tried to delete him from the system. He rewrote the whole thing.